certificate, school records, anything that confirms she was born a red, and then they went ahead and did it. And now nobody can figure out that she has the mutation, unless they have an IQ above 70, in which case she's probably fucked. Luckily for her, none of the villains in this series have an IQ above 70. Somebody slips Mare a note telling her to go to a specific theater at a specific time, so her and Maven go there, and then they run into Will Whistle again, and they get taken to a hidden underground train, like the remains of a subway car. Like, this is implied to be in the ruins of New York City, or at least near the ruins of New York City. The train goes to an abandoned area that's surrounded by signs and markers that trick Geiger counters, so people think that the ruins are irradiated. So it's the home base of the Scarlet Guard in Norta. Keep in mind that the Scarlet Guard operates outside, but this is their home base in the country. And they mention that things are horrible for the Reds now because there's increased conscription, increased executions, the curfews, etc. And Mare gives them the list of people with powers that Julian made and explains the situation to them. So, hey, there's other Reds out there that have powers. I think this is a list of a bunch of them. You should go out and find them. And so Farley decides that the only way to take over the government is via a coup, because they don't have the numbers or enough weapons or anything to just fight the army head on. So basically, they realize they can go to Archeon and cut off all the government buildings from the rest of the city, and from there they can run the country. The only way they can think of to pull this plan off is to get Cal on their side, and the only way they can think to get Cal on their side is to have Mare manipulate him by using the fact that he seems to be in love with her. It's kind of a vague plan, not a very good one. So Mare and Maven head back to the palace where a member of the Scarlet Guard has been captured. But before that member of the Scarlet Guard can be captured, she eats a cyanide capsule and dies. That night, the Scarlet Guard blows up a bridge near the palace, which cuts it off from the other side of the river. Again, it's isolating the palace, the treasury, and other government buildings from the rest of the city. Now, Cal gathers up his legion, which is nearby, and it is loyal to him personally, and he's gonna prepare them to attack, but Mare stops him and tries to convince him to use his soldiers to take over the palace and, quote, force his father to change the world. No specifics are given there, just, you should force your father to change the world. But Cal is like, why would I ever do that? I love my dad. And then he has her arrested. So Maven and Mare are taken to the throne room to see the king and queen. And Maven is just like, yep, I helped plan this. I helped to try and overthrow you, Dad. What are you gonna do about it? And before things progress much more, Queen Ilara just takes control of Cal and Tiberius, and Maven breaks free from his restraints, and it turns out that they just used Mare. She seems unnecessary to their plan because Maven was already with the Scarlet Guard, and they just needed somebody to work with the Scarlet Guard, so you feel like they could have just used him. Whatever. Mare was being used. Queen Ilara killed Cal's mother many years ago, and so that she could marry the king. And that's actually covered a bit more in the prequel novella called Queen Song, if you're interested. And Ilara, controlling Cal, makes him behead his father, and at the last second she turns a security camera on so that she catches footage of it. And then she acts all shocked and horrified and starts going, oh my gosh, you killed the king! And then she broadcasts that so everyone sees it. And everybody thinks that Cal is a murderer, and since he ascended to the throne illegally by murdering his father, then that means by default, Maven would become king instead. And the thing is, people know that the king can control people's minds, but at no point does anyone question the narrative. At no point do they go, hey, maybe this lady over here is evil. She actually like told her son to kill the king so her son could become the king. Maybe that happened. I don't know. But no one stops and thinks that. These people would be real big fans of King Gyanendra, I tell you that much. I wonder if a single person in my audience is actually going to understand that fucking joke. So Cal and Mare try to run away, but they're captured instantly, and they are sentenced to be executed. And you might be thinking, okay, they're going to be beheaded or hanged or maybe put in front of a firing squad. Nope. They're just going to throw the two of them into an arena along with a bunch of other silvers, and they're going to fight them, and the other silvers are apparently going to kill them during the fight.
That's stupid! Use your common sense!
Evangeline, as well as a bunch of others, are chosen to kill them, and then they throw them in, and a whole big fight starts. And this goes on for a little while. Mare doesn't do that much during the fight. She just doesn't. She helps a little bit, but mostly it's Cal doing everything. And They win, and they kill a few of the other combatants because what sort of a book did you think this was? But then, Maven, as the new king, summons thousands of soldiers all around the arena to just shoot them to death, and Mare summons a lightning storm. Like, the clouds open up and start shooting down lightning all over the place, and she and Cal manage to escape during the chaos that causes. They escape into some tunnels, and then they fall into water, and the main character goes unconscious so they can be moved somewhere else in a surprising way because what sort of book did you think this was? They get rescued by a few members of the Scarlet Guard, which includes Barley, Lorne, and Shade, Mare's apparent dead brother, whose name is so edgy after exterminated by Shadow the Hedgehog. Because it turns out Shade is still alive somehow, and the book just ends with them all vowing revenge on Maven. And Cal also gets taken prisoner by the Scarlet Guard and put in silent stone cuffs so that he can't do anything because they don't actually trust him. And if that summary felt long, trust me, the rest of the books are much worse. So then we move on to the second book, which is called Glass Sword. And I just want to take a moment to say that these covers are way too simple. Like, seriously, look at these. And then look me in the eyes and tell me these are distinct and you can easily tell them apart. Also, I just want to say thanks to my younger sister for giving me her copies of the first two books because she didn't want them anymore and was going to throw them out, and if I hadn't gotten them however many years ago she gave them to me, I don't know if I would have actually read this series. So Glass Sword begins with Mare on the underground train that takes them to the abandoned city from the last book and washing off all the blood from her fight. And they go to the hidden Scarlet Guard base and they have to immediately flee because the army found out where they were. Because remember, they brought Maven along for that trip before. It's still strange that they trusted a priest. That is so strange, but they did it. And so he knows where the base is, he tells the army where they are, and they fire a bunch of missiles and artillery at them, and then the army comes in on foot, and there's some fighting. Now, it turns out that Shade's special power is that he can teleport. So he does that a few times, and while he's doing it, he also winds up getting shot, shielding his sister from a bullet. He lives, but he does get shot. Now, during the battle, King Maven shows up so that he can gloat, and then they escape in a submarine, which they just call an underwater boat, because I guess they're Germans. So Shade informs Mare that the Scarlet Guard has more strongholds all over. And it turns out that Farley is not actually their leader, she's just the commander of this set. So she's the leader of all the Scarlet Guard in Norda, but she is not leader of the ones outside the country. So they head to an island called Tuck where they have another base, and it's really, really far out of the way, so nobody knows it's there. This one's super, super secret. And like I said before, this entire time, Cal is being held in chains because no one is sure if he's trusted. And when they arrive at Tuck, Mare sees that the rest of her family is there too. Like, yeah, at some point Shade got them and just brought them over here, so there's no need to worry about them or their safety. And I'm just gonna tell you now, the first book took 100 pages to get started. This one takes 130 pages to get started, and pretty much everything that happens in that 130 pages takes place. The Scarlet Guard is also led by a man who is almost always just referred to as the Colonel. The Colonel chastises Farley for failing to overthrow the Norton government with 100 soldiers, because that seems like a reasonable thing to pull off. Like, literally, he just gave her 100 soldiers, told her to try and overthrow the government, and then when she failed, he's chastising her for it. Okay. He's also her father, and it turns out that the Colonel and Farley are originally from the Lakelands. Like I said, the Scarlet Guard is an international organization, and they want to recruit Reds with powers, who they call the New Bloods, because they think that those will be their best foot soldiers to help them overthrow the current system. Now, the Colonel has Cal chained up somewhere and is doing some sort of medical experimentation to him. It's not explained at all. And Mare tries to get him out, but Killorn betrays her, and she wounds up being imprisoned by the Colonel too. Killorn is actually cool though, he was playing double agent and he helps them. And basically the Colonel has them in a room where they're strapped to a chair and doing experiments on them, and then they ambush him because he didn't bring any guards with him in the room, and then they inject him with whatever he was about to inject Mare with. I don't know why there were no guards in the room with him, and I don't know what this injection does to him other than make him pass out for a while. So Shade, Cal, Mare, Killorn, and Farley all go steal a jet and start flying off. And luckily Cal is a pilot. He knows how to fly, luckily. And they all flee from the island to escape the Colonel because I guess he's evil. But then at the end of the book, they team back up with him again, and they forget all about this. It doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't make sense. They decide their best course of action is to go around and gather up new bloods and to form an army. Once again, this took 130 pages to happen, and the conflict with the Colonel goes nowhere and makes no sense. They could literally have just gotten to the base and the Colonel says, hey, go out and recruit these new bloods, like just give them the assignment, and there'd be very little fuss, and it would save us so much time. And you might be wondering, is this supposed to be a split among the rebels that represents how people rebel against authoritarian regimes for a variety of different reasons? Is it an example of how some people are rightfully mad at Silvers but don't actually care about fixing problems, instead just desiring revenge? Will Mare have to reconcile her own desire for revenge with a desire to change the world and prevent injustices from befalling others? Shame, because that sounds kind of neat. I think this plot point only happened because the author wants to show Mare being even more of a badass rebel by having her fight not just the authority of the government, but also the authority of the rebels. Like, I don't know, this is why I wanted to do a summary of this shit. Like, I am saving you all so much time from having to read this while also allowing you to take part in the conversation surrounding it. You're welcome. Now, most of the rest of the book from this point forward is just the heroes going around, gathering up new bloods and recruiting them. And I'll be honest, it's not horrible. It's better than the first book, at least, for the most part. So first they go off and they recruit a man named Nick. He has impenetrable skin. And he's a middle-aged man. His wife died a while ago. His 2 daughters were both killed in the war. Specifically, Cal was their commander, and he got them killed in a battle. So as soon as he sees Cal, he's immediately pissed and tries to kill him. But they manage to subdue him, and they ask him, hey, you want to come fight the power with us? And he says he has nothing left, and he's willing to put aside his hatred for Cal temporarily if it means bringing down the whole system. So already, this guy who's only been here a couple of pages has more personality than most of the cast, and he does nothing else the rest of the series after this scene. They go to the city of Harbor Bay, where everybody speaks with Boston accents, which did bring me some amusement, like imagining everybody talking just from Boston. And while they're in Harbor Bay, they ask the gang for help tracking down the next target. Here's a guy named France, who immediately leads them into a trap. Because everyone in this series just constantly betrays everyone else, because that's how the world works, apparently. I don't know, maybe all this betrayal is just trying to emphasize that Mare, while she is very, very powerful, she is also very vulnerable. She's like a glass cannon. Or a glass... So anyways, France didn't actually betray them, I think, because he himself set the trap and then he immediately helps them escape the trap. I don't know, make of that what you will. So he stays with them when they leave the city as well. Just so you're aware that that happens. I guess he's a good guy, but I really don't know. So they run through some tunnels. There's actually a lot of running through secret tunnels in this series, and they pop out somewhere safe. They argue some more, Mare distrusts people, etc. And one of the new bloods they were looking for was a guy named Wolliver Galtz, and he's dead before they get there. Mare cries for a bit because this stranger died, and she was unable to save him. They get ambushed, yet again, this time by Maven and some others. And they actually manage to subdue them for a bit, and Maven actually brands Mare. It's written in a weird way, so I wasn't sure that he was branding her until much later when they clarify, but I don't know, he does something bad to her here, ooh. And so Mare passes out from the pain, and then she just wakes up on the jet, like they already escaped while she was passed out. How did they escape? Who cares? Maven is also engaged to Evangeline now. Like, him and his brother just swapped love interests, like Cal and Mare are now a thing, which I find kind of funny, and I also feel like it would be super awkward. Because I also have brothers, like, swapped girlfriends or something. That'd be weird. It would be weird. So they gather up a bunch more new bloods, and they hide them all at a Scarlet Guard camp, and soon there are 26 people there who are all training their powers. Now, what's their goal beyond this? Unclear at the moment. They are just gathering up an army to use for something at some point. I swear, the longer these books get, the less happens. Like, the first book is the shortest of the series by a fair margin, and that one has much more stuff happen than the third book and the fourth book, and a little bit more than the second book. So Mare goes out on the jet to gather yet more people, and while they're out there, they meet a man named John who can see the future. Now, like all good fantasy series, this person who can see the future only exists because they can tell the main characters that they're important and special, and his prophecies also change multiple times, because why would you want prophecies if they didn't change multiple times? Prophecies, there's no point is what I'm getting at. Anyways, John tells them that Julian has been taken prisoner and is now being held somewhere called Koros Prison, which is a very notorious place that the heroes are afraid of, and it's meant for holding silvers. It's full of Maven's political opponents mostly. But there's also a bunch of new bloods there that the Queen wants to brainwash and use as an army. Again, I feel like they've been doing this for years, but whatever. Now, John says that they'll find something helpful at Little Sword Lake, so they head off there, and John manages to escape. Now, while they're at Little Sword Lake, a girl pulls a gun on them, but they manage to subdue her. Now, this girl's name is Cameron. Cameron is a new blood. Specifically, she is a silence, meaning she can shut down other people's powers. And she's originally from a tech town, but she escaped, and then she was caught and sent to Koros Prison for a little while, but then she escaped from Koros Prison. So the characters realize, okay, this girl knows stuff, she can help us break some other people out of there. Now, she really doesn't want to help them, but they convince her to help by reminding her that the prisoners will die if they don't do anything, and they also offer to train her and help her learn to control her powers. Now, they only have 3 days to storm the prison and get everybody out. Why do they only have 3 days? Because John said so. Like, that's it. John just said they only have 3 days. So Cameron tells everybody the layout of the prison. The only really important part is that the cell blocks are all checkered. So they'll have one silver cell block and one new blood cell block. One silver, one new blood, etc. That way none of them trust their neighbors, and it prevents them from working together. Now, they fly into the prison, and they're able to land by radioing in and pretending that a new blood named Nanny is Maven, because Nanny can make herself sound like other people. They enter the prison, they kill a bunch of guards, and then they move on trying to reach the command center. And they get found out, but they fight a couple of people, and then they reach the command center without too much trouble, really. Like, it's surprisingly easy to get into this prison. Now, along the way, they see some people in the cells, including a little girl who is on the verge of death from starvation. And while they're fighting, Mare has a bunch of guards at her mercy, and she sees or thinks back on this little girl who is about to starve, and all the guards beg her not to kill them and say they were just following orders. I bare my teeth in a snarl. Lightning has no mercy. Once I watched my brothers burn ants with a bit of glass. This is similar and worse. Hey, look at that! Mare had a moment of character development. Are you thinking that this might lead somewhere? Will Mare finally decide to embrace her violent desires and allow her humanity to become one more casualty of this war? Or will she see this side of herself and be so horrified she refuses to ever use her powers anymore? No! Shame, because that sounds really neat. So they manage to reach Julian, and they get him out of the prison by Shade teleporting him to the jet. Now, by this point, they've released a bunch of the prisoners, and there's just a full-scale riot going on, and tons of people are trying to get away. The guards are trying to get them under control. There's powers, there's shooting, just tons of chaos going around all over the place. Now, Mare manages to get away, but right before the escape, Ptolemus, who apparently was there, actually kills her brother Shade. Another important thing happens in this scene, and it's a little confusing. So the Queen is also there for whatever reason, and she's surrounded by a ton of guards. And then it cuts to Shade being killed, and then the next chapter begins, and the Queen is just dead. Like, she's just already gone. Seemingly, Mare killed her, but it happened in a 10-second gap that they just don't show in the book for some reason. So while flying off, Farley and Mare get into a fight, because obviously, and Mare tells her that Shade's answer to her question is yes, and Mare doesn't know what it means, and the audience doesn't know what it means, but we find out eventually. Now, Cal tells Mare that she lacks empathy and only sees other people as tools to be used, which is really rich coming from a general who threw away the lives of thousands of his own soldiers. But okay. Mare decides to do a news broadcast with the Queen's body. Also, at this point, they're cool with the Colonel again. Like I said, they just make up without issues. So Mare and the Colonel do a news broadcast alongside the Queen's body, and they show footage of the prison. Because that way, they're hoping they will turn some of the Silver Houses against Maven. Because again, he had a bunch of his political opponents in prison there, and he's hoping that, okay, they will start working against him. Specifically, they're hoping that the Silver Houses will all fight and tear each other apart while the Reds are unified, and that will allow them to win. Rise, red as the dawn. So they go back to Tuck with the Colonel, and like I said, he's fine with them. Like, they bring him the new blood prisoners, so he just lets everything go from before. Again, they injected him with mystery chemicals. You think he'd be a little upset about that, but he's just not. And Mare gives her broadcast telling everyone about her being born a silver was fake, like it was a lie made up by the previous king. And she tells them about the New Bloods and how they're real and that everyone should join the Scarlet Guard so that they can rise up and overthrow the government. She also makes it clear to the Silvers that all their missing friends and family members were at the prison that Maven sent them to, and that Maven killed his own father. Now, the Colonel takes her to see some ambassadors after that. There are two twins named Rash and Tahir who share a telepathic link. In fact, they seem to have like one brain just split between two bodies because they're constantly finishing each other's sentences and stuff. And anyways, they are from the Free Republic of Montfort, which is a country way to the west out in the Rocky Mountains. Now, years ago, Montfort overthrew their monarchy, which was very similar to Norta's, and replaced it with an elected government where Reds, Silvers, and New Bloods are all considered equal. Now, Mare has never heard of this before and thinks it's weird, but is excited by the thought of it. She's like, wow, we get to choose our own leaders and we would all be equal? That sounds great. Now, it's not too weird that an undereducated, over-propagandized red girl from Norta wouldn't know about different forms of government. After all, the regime probably wouldn't want its citizens getting any sort of idea, so they would probably not tell them about democracy and stuff. But later, even educated characters like Evangeline are shocked by the idea of a government that isn't a monarchy, and they're shocked by the idea of equality between Reds and Silvers. But again, they just have a nearby country that recently had a revolution about this, and they just don't know about it. I'm not sure how that works. But anyways, the important part is that Montfort is arming and funding the Scarlet Guard, and the Colonel isn't actually in charge. The Red Generals of Command are, but we barely see them, so they may as well not exist in the series. Apparently there's actually a whole complex alliance between similar groups to the Scarlet Guard that Montfort is helping out and helping arm. So like again, it's an international movement of a bunch of different organizations. We never hear about any of the organizations besides the Scarlet Guard, so they may as well not exist, but apparently they're there. Now the twins ask Mare to escort all the New Bloods to Montfort, and she doesn't trust them because John said something cryptic that makes her suspicious. So they bury Shade, and then they fly off somewhere, but while they're flying, a magnetron grabs their jet and pulls it out of the sky. This was actually a pretty cool scene. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the jet starts getting like crushed around them and falling out of the sky while they're in it. It's actually a cool scene. So it turns out Maven and some of his minions were on the ground where they crash. And there's a fight, and Mare and company realize that they're probably going to lose, so she just gives herself up as a prisoner in exchange for all of the others being set free. Maven agrees, and then she puts her in a collar of silent stone to prevent her from using her powers, and then brings her to the throne room and forces her to kneel, and then the book just ends. And it's continued in book 3. Tomorrow, I lost my knife, so I will now be pointing with this handy-dandy long sword. Okay, this joke is not working. Nope, I'm not pointing with the sword. It's not happening. So we now go to book 3, which is called King's Cage. And King's Cage is my least favorite book in the series by a pretty big margin. And I don't like the others, because the others, they take about 100 pages for anything to happen. This one takes over 300 pages for anything of note to happen. Like, at the beginning, Mare is held prisoner by Maven, And that is seriously it for a long time. Also, it is raining outside, so if you hear thunder or anything, I don't know if the microphone's picking it up, but if you do, I apologize. This is also the first book to have chapters from multiple POVs, because the first two books were done entirely from Mare's first-person perspective, and now we're throwing in other characters. And honestly, the more I see this done, the more I freaking hate it. Like, it never needs to happen. Stop doing it. You are solely making filler because you're a shit writer. Stop doing it. So anyways, Mare is held in a cell for the first few weeks after she was captured at the end of the last book. Then she's let out along with a silent stone collar on her neck to prevent her from doing anything. Now, Maven is busy trying to navigate this difficult political situation and has her around as some sort of weird emotional support. I don't know, it's never super explained, but I don't think this is the sort of thing that needs to be super explained. Like, he feels as if he's broken her mentally, so she won't do anything, and he also seems to have some lingering romantic feelings for her, and he actually confides in her about his mother's abuse. Because you see, in this book, we find out that his mother, Queen Alara, actually went into his head and removed his love for his father and his brother, and as well as also just messed him up psychologically a bit more, basically make him more ruthless, like she purposely turned him into a sociopath. And that's kind of an interesting idea, but we don't really go that far with it. And that is basically all that happens. And Mare is held prisoner for about 6 months in universe. In other words, Mare is being held in a cage which is controlled by the king. She's being held in a king's cage. I don't know, joking aside, the only thing here that was kind of good was, again, his mother reaching in and turning him into a sociopath. Like, it was pretty hardcore. It did make me sympathize with him a bit. Like, he is just a kid, remember. He's only like, I don't think they specify his age, but he's around 17 or 18 at this stage, and he is just used as a tool. He has these confusing feelings towards his abusive parent, and he's only here on the throne, he's only king, because if he tries to leave at this stage, he will be killed. And hearing all that, you may be thinking, will Mare try to find the person underneath that damaged mess? Will she try to heal him, magically or otherwise? Will Maven attempt to reconcile with his brother and move past his mother's conditioning? No! That's a shame. It sounds kind of cool. And Mare still loves Maven. Kind of. I think. I don't know. Again, her feelings towards him never make any sort of sense. Like, at the beginning, sure, she was kind of into him because he was nice to her and stuff, but after that, the fact that all of her feelings didn't immediately evaporate is very strange to me. The most interesting thing from this whole segment is when somebody tries to assassinate Maven, and it's not the Scarlet Guard or anyone, it's actually some people from other silver houses who want to overthrow him. That's like the only interesting scene from this whole sequence. And there's one other thing that I have to mention about this, though, and that is that Mare reads a history book about the world, which is fine for the most part. Like, it gives a couple details about the history of this world and how it works, how it's set up. That's fine. And it turns out that this war between Norda and the Lakelands started because the Lakelands started to take Norda's land, and it's because they lost agricultural land out west to another country which is just called Prairie, which is the laziest name ever. Which actually makes sense. Wars are usually fought over resources of some kind. So, yeah, the Lakelands invading, that makes sense. It actually makes sense how this would start. But you might wonder, in the past 100 years of war, how many people do you think have died? Guess. Just take a guess. You will probably be wrong, but just take a guess. Okay, are you ready? It is 500,000 silvers and 50 million reds. And that is just a war between these two not very well populated countries. Like, Norda and the Lakelands are pretty small. It's after an apocalypse. They don't seem that densely populated. They seem like they have less people than those areas do today, even. Bruh. So we spend a little bit of time going over things from Cameron's point of view. Remember the girl who just showed up in the last book to help them break into the prison and doesn't really do anything after that? Yeah, we see some things from her POV. So she is at a Scarlet Guard base and mostly just watches other stuff happen that's kind of important. Like, it turns out that Killorn and Cal are no longer rivals for whatever reason. They're just kind of wary around each other. I'm glad we're seeing this from Cameron's point of view, though. You know, it's not like we could show it from one of their point of views or show them getting to know each other and getting to like each other and getting to trust each other. Just tell us that they're okay with each other now. That's great. Also, Farley is pregnant right now. We don't know how it happened or who the dad is until later, but it is just kind of mentioned. Yeah, she's pregnant now. And anyways, while all this is going on, the Scarlet Guard decide that they should take over a northern stronghold called Corvium, which is right along the border with the Lakelands. Like, it's a very important spot for the war. And since it's so important, they think, yeah, if we take this, it'll send a message. And Cal says that it's suicide and they shouldn't do it, but they decide they're going to do it anyways. And off-screen, Cal actually leads the attack. He's a daring assault on the walls in the middle of a blizzard, and he takes over the fortress. That sounds cool. I kinda wish we could have seen it instead of hearing about it secondhand after the fact, but it sounds cool at least. So back with Mare and Maven, they actually meet with the king of the Lakelands. And the Scarlet Guard is causing trouble in both countries, so they want to take care of them. And they think the best way to do that is by finally bringing an end to the war. Eventually, Maven agrees to marry the princess of the Lakelands to cement an alliance, and her name is Princess Iris. He was supposed to marry Evangeline, but I guess he just didn't want to anymore. Like, it was more politically expedient to marry Iris because, that ends the war. And the end of war means fewer people dying. It means the end of conscription. It's actually a very positive thing for the people of both the Lakelands and Norda, even if it's done for selfish reasons. And upon hearing that, you may be wondering, with Maven ending the war, he's going to make the red population of his country a lot happier with him. Will he continue on improving their lives and giving them more rights? Maybe this will alienate him from the other Silvers, leaving him with a support base of regular people, kind of like an tyranny. Maybe Mare will have to choose between supporting the regime of someone she hates, who is making the world a slightly better place, or continuing to fight against him on the slim chance that she'll be able to make the world a much better place. Does any of this happen?
No! No!
Shame! That sounds kind of neat. So Maven and Iris get married in this big public ceremony. And from this wedding, Mare takes only the most important information. He doesn't kiss her the way he kissed me. Any fire he might have is far away. I wish I were too. Oh, fuck off. The fact that this love triangle, or pentagon or hexagon, whatever the hell it is at this stage, is not dead is a crime against the very concept of literature. Maven and Mare had next to zero chemistry to start with, and then he tried to kill her multiple times, got her brother killed, imprisoned and tortured her. Like, why? Why is she even a little bit into him? There's nothing here to make the romance feel real, and the author couldn't even commit to it. Like, there's no actual moments between the two of them. The story just sort of acts like they're in love, but being torn apart by circumstance, or being torn apart by Maven's particular flaws. Not Mare's flaws, obviously, because Mare doesn't have an actual personality, let alone flaws that might cause her issues throughout the story. I genuinely think there are a lot of people out there who have no idea that you can have a storyline happen without bringing up kissing every 10 fucking minutes. Like, the very thought of having a story where romance isn't the central feature confuses and scares them. Okay, I'm sorry, the rant is over. Let's go back to summarizing. Now, during the wedding, the Scarlet Guard attacks, and they bring out a storm, so it's raining and lightning is raining down all over the place, and then the guard attacks and a giant fight breaks out. Now, Mare manages to get away, but Evangeline catches her, and Evangeline drags her off to an isolated area, and Mare thinks, oh great, she's finally about to kill me, which, as the one-dimensional villain she's been up to this point, that wouldn't be that strange of her to do. But she actually grabs the key to Mare's collar and frees her on one condition. Her brother Ptolemus gets left alone. Like, no one tries to kill him. And Mare agrees to it, so she frees her and she runs off. Now, it sounds like Evangeline is just 100% done with Maven at this point, and I kind of assumed it was because he dumped her and was marrying Iris instead, and she was just tired of getting thrown around. But there is actually more to it than that, which we'll find out in a little bit. Thank you, I whisper, words I never thought I would say to her. They unsettle us both. You want to thank me, Barrow? She mutters, taking away the last of my bindings. Then keep your word and let this fucking place burn.
She said the F word.
So Mare runs off through this whole battle in some chaos. She fights some dudes. She eventually finds Cal. He continues fighting some dudes, and then she escapes. Yeah, it turns out the Scarlet Guard staged the attack to rescue her and also send a message that the king is unsafe and weak. And while they were there, they figured, hey, if we can kill any VIPs, then that'd be great. Now, we also get a few chapters from Evangeline's perspective from this point forward. And it turns out that she's really surly, not because she's being forced to marry that she doesn't love, and then a king that she doesn't love, and then just being abandoned by both of them, which would be semi-reasonable. She's surly because of that, but also she's gay. Yeah, she has a sort of girlfriend who she knows that she can never be with because she's just here to be a political pawn and to marry some powerful man. Like, her girlfriend is named Elaine, and she just kind of exists. Evangeline's father really just sees her as an object that he can push around and trade with people for other more valuable objects, and honestly, it's understandable why she might be so confused. Now, Evangeline's family is called the Samos family, and they used to rule an independent kingdom, which is just called the Rift, and it's in an area between the Lakelands and Nordham. And we don't get an exact location, really, and we don't see a map of it, but just a general description of where it is. Now, her father, Volos Samos, has actually decided he's going to declare independence and the Rift is going to split off from Nordham. Now, their family name is Samos, which is spelled kind of like Amos, as in Amos Burton from The Expanse, so that is going to be the representation of Volos Samos. After that big announcement, we go back to Mare, who is now safe with the Scarlet Guard again, and she eyes up Cal and is thinking, oh my gosh, he's so hot and awesome, so I guess, again, she's still in love. Cal, I whisper in his ear, lips brushing flesh. He smells like smoke and blood, heat and sweat. My head fits perfectly in the space between his neck and shoulder. They are now in the country of Piedmont, which is in what is today the American South, and there is a giant branch of the Scarlet Guard hanging out there. Now, the country is run by an oligarchy of princes, one of whom gets elected to be High Prince and in charge of the whole country. And that governmental system becomes important later. Mare sees her family again, and I don't even remember if I mentioned it because it's just so unimportant, but Lisa's hand has been healed at this stage, so again, there's no tension or fighting of any kind there. It's just she hurt her sister and now she's fine. And so Mare sees her family again, she gets cleaned up, she gets medical care. And you remember how Farley is pregnant? Well, it turns out that the dad was Shade, who was Mare's dead brother. Yeah, there was not any real hinting at this before, it just kind of popped up, like at the end of the second book, like I said before. She tells Farley that, hey, the answer to your question was yes, and she doesn't know what it means, but apparently, like, that's Victoria Aveyard's idea of romance. Farley is also a part of high command of the Scarlet Guard now, so she actually outranks the colonel, her father. They have a meeting with the premier of Montfort, like the premier being like basically the president or prime minister. He's the guy who's in charge of the entire country, and he is a man named Dane Davidson. That name is so amazing, I need to say the entire thing every time I mention it. So Dane Davidson, like I said, is in charge of this entire country, this elected leader, and he just came to this secret base in a foreign country by himself. Like, he didn't send an ambassador, he doesn't seem to have much security, he just came here by himself. Okay. Now, his main goal throughout this whole series is he just wants to spread democracy. You know, he wants to make reds and silvers equal, and he wants to get rid of all the absolute monarchies and other forms. Well, there aren't all absolute monarchies per se, but he wants to get rid of all the monarchies and aristocracies throughout the whole world, which actually does make sense. Like, typically speaking, monarchies don't let democracies stand, especially if those democracies overthrew previously held monarchies. So all these other countries are probably going to try and get rid of the current Montfort government when they get the chance, so he's just acting preemptively. Now, Mare gives them all of the information she has. She mentions that Maven has holes where his mother removed love for his brother, he has trouble with his allies, that she mentions the assassination plot, etc. Now, Dane Davidson explains that Piedmont is actually under their control, sort of. because it's led at the moment by a guy named High Prince Bracken, who works for them because they kidnapped his children and are currently holding them prisoner. And so that's why he lets them use this big military facility as their base. They just kidnapped and are holding onto his children. Prince Bracken has limited control over the country, though, because again, it's run by an oligarchy, so he can't do whatever he wants, and his help will only go so far. Now, Mare trains for a while and winds up getting back in shape. She gets stuck out in the rain with Cal, and it's romantic, I guess, because we just need to spend more time on this bullshit. You might think that since there's 2 books left, we're halfway through the series. No, we're not halfway through. We're like less than a third of the way through, because the 3rd and 4th books are just stupidly fucking long. And at this stage, the books start to get weirdly convoluted as well. I've read more convoluted stories, but it is odd how these ones handle it. So Farley has a baby, and she names her Clara. And remember, Clara is Mare's niece now. That's a new member of her family, so the rest of her family all kind of dotes over her, and it doesn't lead anywhere, but there's a baby now. And then we go back once again to Evangeline's POV. Now her father,